The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello. I'm going to share my webcam so you have some idea of who it is that's talking with you. Hi, I'm Kimi Hirotsuzimski and welcome to the first KSP Partnership webinar. This is going to be a quick overview on the key parameters that we believe drive success for every team. We have a philosophy here at KSP. We believe that every team has the capacity for success, but only when it's operating in an environment that contains the right circumstances. Now, I want you to ask yourself this. If more of your teams were successful, what kind of problems would that solve for your organization? We've spent over 150 cumulative years of project management experience between the principal partners of KSP Partnership in studying the issues that made people and teams more successful in circumstances that ranged from small projects that were only about 6 weeks long to projects that were multiple years in length, including the difference between installing telephone systems or upgrading HR systems to crafting huge chunks of the Hubble Space Telescope. And what we found is that there are 7 fundamentals for strategic project success. And we say that this is important because at a strategic level, because let's face it, projects don't occur in a vacuum. Projects occur because organizations need to get things done. And that becomes a huge driver. If the projects that can feed the successful implementation of strategic objectives are not delivered on time with the right product that will achieve those objectives, then it doesn't matter whether or not they were on budget. In fact, it doesn't matter if you've delivered the wrong thing, if it's even delivered on time. And so that's why one of the things that we discuss and we start out with right at the very beginning is the key parameter number 1 of clear definition. Now, in the promos, we said you will get 2 tips that you can walk away with and use immediately. And under clear definition, let me be very specific. I want you to think about the last time that you had a discussion with someone and you both walked away thinking that you understood exactly what the other person said. You went about your business, and about a week later, you happen to run into that individual in the hallway and you start talking again and you find out you've gone in completely different directions. See, clear definition isn't just about being clear about what a person said. It goes to the communications loop of understanding what that person meant. So one of the first things that I want to suggest is, have you tried implementing a feedback loop? Now, I know for some people this is just a little odd. Well, no, we were very good. We understood each other completely. It was crystal. And they feel like a feedback loop might be something that they would do that would be, gosh, a waste of time, Kimi. Do you have any idea how much time we already spend in meetings? Well, here's the thing about feedback loops. Any time that you clarify a message that you've received with somebody as early as possible, you go a long way to preventing misunderstandings on down the road. In project teams, those misunderstandings could result in serious discrepancies between requirements from one part of the deliverable to another, and that becomes huge. And that takes me to my second tip on clear definition. Oftentimes, it's the things that we don't say that can cause us the most difficulty because it leaves all sorts of rooms for misunderstandings. So one of the best tools, one of the most basic tools of clarity is something called an is not list. Literally take a piece of paper or a whiteboard, divide it in half with a line down the middle, and across one side, write is, across the other side, write is not. On the side that says is, write down all the things that you believe your project's product is supposed to achieve for your client and your sponsor. On the is not column, list those things that may be key to successful implementation of the strategic objective that you're supporting, but you don't believe they're actually within the charter of what your team is supposed to be doing. Now, I've had people tell me that they think what I'm trying to do is set them up for a terrible discussion with their client and senior management, but in fact, it's the exact opposite. Again, the sooner we find the kernel of a misunderstanding, the faster we can address it and stop throwing money down the tubes. I want to ask you guys a question. I'm going to put up a poll. And I would like to see what your answers are. We're just going to launch it for 5 seconds. That we've got a nice tight community here and want to see if you can tell me how much time in a week do you think your team spends in conflict based on misunderstanding rather than a difference of opinion. There are 3 answers. Remember, this is in a week. Okay. Now, I'm going to make a huge assumption, and that is that most of us wouldn't mind getting that week back. So the thing that I would like to ask you is this: what does it take to get that hour back in every week? And oh, by the way, what is that worth to your organization when you can in fact do that? Now, our second key success parameter is an ownership model. And this ownership model strikes a lot of people as vaguely familiar. They'll look at it and they say, well, I recognize all of the elements on it. So in defense of clear definition, I'm going to suggest that you think about some very specific definitions that we use here at KSP. There's something very bizarre about the word accountability. You know, I've been teaching project management and project leadership for 15 years. And before that, I spent over, well, it's embarrassing, but I spent over 2.5 decades leading project teams. And one of the biggest problems that we had was the fact that the words accountability and responsibility were often deemed to mean the same thing. Well, one of the principal partners here at KSP Partnership came up with an ownership model, and you see it on your screen right now. And the very first thing that he talks about is accountability. Accountability isn't getting blamed when things go wrong. When an individual takes accountability, and it is an individual's internal taking of accountability that can really make it work, then what they're really doing is they're making a commitment to timely reporting of anything that changes the situation or the understanding that all of the rest of the team have about what's going on with the project. Now, the other word that people frequently use when we talk about ownership is responsibility. And again, in our model, responsibility is an internal quality, and it means something very, very specific. It means when an individual takes responsibility, they have made a commitment to do the job right. It's one of our favorite clients has a phrase for it, and he calls it fierce resolve. In other words, if I have a firm commitment to do the job right, it means I won't let anything get in my way. The ownership model is also why we have something we call full delegation or true delegation in the KSP partnership programs. Because once an individual has taken accountability and responsibility, both internal, then the wise project leader gives them authority. Now, authority is pretty much one of those things where there's a dividing line. Some authority can be taken, but in organizations, frequently authority must also be granted. We believe that authority is comprised of three very specific things. When I, as a senior manager, give someone authority, I'm giving them permission to go forth and take what they need to do the job, which means I also have to delegate power to them. They have to be able to know that going forward, if they are fighting for resources or they are negotiating to be able to get deadlines changed, that I will have their back. They, in fact, have my power at a de facto level. But the last P, oh wow, that's the one that's a little tougher. Because everybody has a learning curve. Nobody's exempt from mistakes. When someone makes a mistake, however, in an organization that supports the ownership model, then what happens is that the senior managers have the ability to gain trust from the people to whom they have fully delegated, because those people also have protection. When I make a mistake, without that kind of protection, it leaves me feeling very vulnerable, and it puts in jeopardy the level of trust that I have with the people that I report to. And by the way, everybody has bosses. So quick recap. If there is true ownership, the individual who has taken ownership has taken accountability to heart and has made a commitment to the team that they will, in a timely fashion, report anything that has changed in the project environment. They've also taken responsibility by making a commitment to do the job right. As a result, the project leadership team, the senior management leadership team, has granted authority. They've given permission. They've delegated power. And in the case of missteps or mistakes or misunderstandings, to put it bluntly, they have that person's back. So let me ask you, does your organization support this definition of ownership? This is fabulous. This is absolutely fabulous. It's also, if I may say so, rather unusual. What tends to happen in a lot of organizations is that there is a sense that full ownership cannot be granted because in some cases, there are senior leadership teams that don't always have the same level of trust in the people that they have put in positions of leadership on teams that report to them. In other cases, it's sometimes just an issue of the organizational culture. So I'm delighted to see that we've got so many people on this particular call where their organizations do support this model of ownership. What I'd be very interested in, and I invite you to write me at zimski@ksppartnership.com, and let me know what you think in particular tells you that this level of commitment to the ownership model exists in your organization. Our third key success parameter is customer focused deliverable. Now, this, I have to say, is a time honored cartoon in project management. You see, customer focused deliverables is based in a very simple premise. It's based on the fact that if we understand what our customer is trying to accomplish with our product, we're a lot more likely to build the product that the customer wants, that the customer has in fact hired us to do it. It's not rocket science, and it's not really that difficult, but what it really does for a lot of people is change the perspective of how they look at the product that they're working on. This means if someone comes to you and they have a suggestion, the North Star by which you measure whether or not that suggestion is a great one and should be implemented, or it should be recorded in the change log as a good idea, but now is not quite the time, should always go back to what the customer wants to achieve. And here's one of the reasons why. At one point, a customer asked us to evaluate whether or not the changes that were being recorded on their current projects, and this was a very short space in time, it was about a 90-day window, were changes because the client had changed their minds, were changes because the team had changed their approaches, or were changes due to lack of clarity. It was fascinating. Before I give you the results, let me ask you this. What is the main source of change in your projects? Interestingly enough, this is one of the biggest reasons why clear definition is our very first key success parameter. And we'll talk a little bit about what stakeholder commitment, stakeholder communities, what it means in terms of clear definition for the project's actual objective and chartering the right things at the right time. So in terms of customer deliverable focus, let me suggest to you that there are a couple of things that we can do to do it a little bit better. One, do more than a preliminary stakeholder analysis at the very beginning of the project. Particularly in an environment where project stakeholder community members are able to influence changes in our projects and in our products, we want to make sure that there is an ability to meet their expectations, and you can only do it if you actually know what their expectations are. Go back one more step and you realize you can't find out what their expectations are if you don't know who they are. One other suggestion that helps you really define more clearly and get a more strong level of focus on the customer-focused deliverable is this. Many times what we'll get isn't a description of the end state that the client wants to achieve by use of the product that we're delivering them. we get a description of the product that they expect us to deliver. Ask the question, what is the end state that you want to be a result after we've delivered that product to you? And there's another even more important question to ask. After we deliver the product to you, this project is over, you got the product, it meets all the requirements, you're a happy camper. What if it doesn't happen the way you expect it to? What is the worst possible result? Now, every project manager on this call, heck, every project manager that I know, has this nerve. They have this twitch in them, and I call it the risk management twitch. Because when we ask the question, what is the worst possible outcome for this situation, we are in essence starting the risk management process. And it probably won't surprise you to know that risk management is in fact one of the things that we consider to be a key success parameter. It's actually our very last one, so hold on and we'll get to that one. Customer deliverable focus. It doesn't mean that we don't think that good ideas should come from the team. Absolutely good ideas should come from the team. But deliverable that comes out of the customer's focus is one that will help them to achieve their goals. And they're the ones that we're here to serve. They're the ones that are going to pay for the project. So that becomes hugely important. Our fourth key success parameter is collaborative spirit. Now, there was a very conscious choice of words, collaborative versus cooperative. And here is why. Collaborative is a much more active approach, a much more active perspective. Cooperative is slightly more passive. It's not a good or bad thing. It just means if you come to me, I will absolutely work with you. Collaborative means I'm looking at a situation and I think, this could actually affect Brandon's results. Maybe I should give him a heads up that some of our test results aren't coming out quite the way we anticipated. So it's a much more proactive stance on this. Collaborative spirit is also based on the premise that many of you have probably heard of in Stephen Covey's book on the speed of trust. Collaborative spirit is not just about the way that the project team itself works, but the way that the project team works within the entire project stakeholder community. For those of you who know me well, and for those of you who are getting to know me, you'll find that I am an absolute advocate that more aggressive and more conscious, more careful stakeholder management and stakeholder communications can spell the difference between success or failure for a great number of our projects. We can't meet the expectations of stakeholders that we haven't identified or haven't spoken to. Your own results from the poll show that a huge impact could be made on the amount of time we spend on changes. And by the way, those changes don't always happen at the most convenient of times, do they? We could make a huge impact on those changes if we just did a better job of stakeholder identification and stakeholder management, because collaborative spirit means acknowledging the role that any given person within the stakeholder community can have on the success or failure of the project itself. The more we know about what's going on with our stakeholders, the better we are going to have a chance to be able to do something monumental and wonderful for them with the products that they're hiring us to create. Now, a couple of things about collaborative spirit. People can often find it difficult to wrap their head around, well, what can I do to actually encourage collaborative spirit? Well, first of all, anytime that a change request is being assessed, beyond prompting, encourage, and in fact, in some cases, you might want to be the one to initiate discussions about how accepting a change on any work is going to affect the work that has already been scheduled downstream. Okay? Support and encourage live handoffs, person to person, even if it's only by phone. If what you're doing is an input to somebody else's work, does it show up in their inbox? Do they get a notification from SharePoint that the deliverable has been deposited? Or is there a conversation going on? And where there are conversations going on instead of just a blind handoff, as project leaders, encourage it, reward it, acknowledge it, appreciate it. Recognize teamwork on a micro level, even if it's just teamwork between 2 individuals or 3 individuals. Now, some of our clients work on teams that are as many as 35 or 40 people, and it's very challenging for them because building collaborative spirit across multiple time zones, and I think everyone here probably knows that, across multiple time zones or multiple countries and cultures can be really difficult. So when people actually take the time to make that effort, really encourage it, really thank them for having made that effort. In that spirit, how much time is actually spent with your team members versus emailing them? I want to congratulate the people who said that it was less than 30 minutes. And this is important because one of the things that you're going to find is that if you really stop and think about it, you can make a much more conscious choice the next time that you have to communicate some information or the next time that you have to get some information. And that can be really important. And here's why. There are a number of different things that happen in a communications model. And you've probably seen a million of these over the course of your career. But you see, every single place where there is a space between a step and the next thing that has to happen is an opportunity for misunderstandings or misinterpretations to occur. It's so much easier for you to catch a potential misunderstanding or misinterpretation in a live conversation. I mean, let's face it, how many of us have received an email and thought to ourselves, wow, I'm not entirely sure I understand this, and I'm not entirely sure that they are sending the message that they intend to. Now, the better you know the person who sent you that message, the greater the opportunity for you to be accurate about how you can actually interpret those things. But really, the amount of information that you get from a live exchange is important. But here's what's even more important. Sometime in between the point when a person misunderstands what you've said, or you've misunderstood what they say, and the next time you actually have a chance to talk with that individual to clear up that misunderstanding, it could do some really irreparable damage to the levels of trust between you as individuals, and that can reverberate out throughout the rest of the project team. It can have a huge impact, particularly because you as leaders in the project management environment are the models by which your team members gauge the health of the project, the health of what's going on. So a couple of things about collaborative spirit. And I want to add this. I told you in clear definition that one of the greatest things that you can do to help increase the level of clarity and increase the level of common definitions used in the language around your project is to use a feedback loop. Now, every once in a while, you'll see a communications model that says there should be a feedback loop. And you'll notice that in our model, we suggest that the sender needs to initiate the feedback loop. And in a lot of models, what you'll see is that they believe the receiver should initiate the feedback loop. Honestly, it doesn't matter who initiates it. But if the sender's message is of such importance that they took the time to craft it and send it, don't you think that they might want to make sure that it was clearly understood? The fifth key success parameter is task interdependency, and it really builds on the first four key success parameters. Think about the last time you took a really good look at the network diagram or the work breakdown structure for a project, or a really good look at detailed requirements when you have it. And I've got to ask you, do you think that everybody in your senior leadership team, do you think that everybody in your stakeholder community understands the level of interdependencies built within the pieces of work that have to be done in order to deliver the final product? Now, I want you to put yourself in the position of one of your team members and answer this question. Now, I believe that one of the reasons that we come out with such a hefty percentage of people answering the question as fairly well for the amount of time that surrounds my specific work is what I call the tyranny of the urgent. Let's face it, you, your team members, everybody around you in the organization, I'd be willing to bet there isn't a single person in your organization that doesn't feel a little stressed over the amount of things that are expected to be achieved by your team at any given point in time. So that creates a huge pressure for being very focused on what is within your immediate time horizon. So I am incredibly pleased to see the people who said, oh, you know what? For the most part, I believe most of my team members have a fairly good understanding about the connection between my work and the final deliverable for the entire project's life cycle. And I think that's great. You guys are doing a terrific job. And hey, if you're willing to share some tips and techniques about what you do to make that work, I'd be delighted. I give attributions all the time. So a couple of things that we do. First of all, make sure that everybody understands what their piece of work has to do with in terms of the final deliverable. What is it that their commitment to doing the job right? What is it going to result in when we actually make the delivery to the client? There is an old story about a gentleman who walks up And this is in the Middle Ages, and he's watching, and these stonemasons are carving stones. They are building a massive building in the parish of his county. And he turns to a stonemason and he says, "What are you doing?" And the stonemason says, "I am crafting this stone into a perfect square so that it can hold up the rest of the wall we are building." And the man goes away, and he comes across someone else who is digging trenches in the garden. And he says, "What are you doing?" He said, "I am digging holes so that we can plant the best plants so that people don't have to have just a building but see the greenery around it in the yard." And he happens upon a fellow wielding a broom. And he's cleaning up the mess of the debris that has resulted from all of these people trying to build this big stone building. It is a cathedral that the local bishop has commissioned. And the gentleman looks at the fellow wielding the broom and says, "And what, sir, are you doing?" And he looks up at the sky, looks back at the man who asked the question and said, "Me? I am cleaning up the mess because we are building a monument to the glory of God." If you know why you're doing something, it gives meaning. There's even a consultant out there who teaches people that you must have a noble purpose behind your work. And if you want the spiritual reason, it's because without purpose, our work is meaningless to us and therefore less meaningful in how we expend our focus. But if you want a really practical reason, here's the reason that she gives, and I think this is fabulous. When you have purpose, it not only gives your work meaning, but it increases your level of commitment to do the job right. Remember, commitment to do the job right was our definition of responsibility in our ownership model. And that's a huge part of what we believe it needs to make things work. One last tip about how to make task interdependency a more powerful tool for the project team as opposed to just one of those horribly complicated things that we need to be aware of as we manage projects. As your team members take on ownership, and as your organizations get even better at adopting and supporting full ownership and full delegation, start having them actually adopt full delegation and plan the delegation of pieces of work at the deliverable level, at least one planning horizon ahead or one sprint ahead as to how we're going to work on this. And remember to always look at how does what we're doing here affect the work that we're going downstream. Which brings us to one of my personal favorite areas, and that is rigorous quality. In a lot of organizations, there is a hugely vocal level of commitment to quality. So, looking at it and knowing that your answers are purely anonymous, what do you think is really the level of commitment to quality in your organization? This is only unusual in one respect. We usually have one or two folks who show up, a very, very small percentage, who show up saying, you know what, in practice, it's low because if even remotely looks like the act of managing quality or measuring quality jeopardizes the schedule, we're not going to do it. So I think that that's terrific that there are at least getting scheduled because it is a huge, huge deal. One of the things that we suggest for rigorous quality is a practice called a peer review. And peer reviews are actually very simple things to do, and they don't have to take an awful long time. They do, however, require a little bit of planning. Let me give you an example. The very first time that I had one of my project plans peer reviewed, before a particular milestone, they had started doing these peer reviews. Before a particular milestone, I was asked, would you please send a copy of your project plan as it stands at this date to these three individuals who are going to take a look at it and measure it against our best practices, decide whether or not it meets the requirements of what we consider to be a complete and solid project plan. I was a little cocky and I said, sure. My boss put his hand on my shoulder and said, I want you to remember, this is a review of the product of your work. It is not a review of the person that you are or the professional that you are. That, by the way, is one of the biggest catches of peer reviews that you as a leader are going to help your team navigate. 3 days later, I go into the peer review. And as I'm going into the peer review, John stops me in the hallway and says, okay, well, when you're done, the peer review is happening about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When you're done, why don't you go, I'll meet you in the lobby. We'll go have a glass of wine. And I looked at him and I said, good Lord, how bad do you think this is going to be? I was a little cocky. I'm a pretty good project manager. Got some great results for my clients. And I walked into the peer review, head held high. I walked out of that first peer review feeling like I'd been hit by a Mack truck. Even the best of us don't always see where we've left holes, where our assumption of knowledge that has been shared, knowledge that is understood on a team-wide basis, turns out not to be as accurate as we thought. I went out to the lobby. John patted me on the shoulder again and said, so how'd it go? And I said, how big a glass of wine are you willing to buy me? But the thing about peer reviews is that it didn't take very long before I took those lessons. My team and I crafted much better plans, much cleaner plans, and in some cases, plans that gave us more flexibility because we were going down to too sharp a level of detail in some places. It was kind of interesting. But the best thing about peer reviews is everybody got better. Everybody got better at different rates of speed, but everybody got better. If you think your organization can deliver better, whether it's an actual product or the plan itself, peer reviews are a good way to go about it. So choose small elements of the project for peer review. And then coach to the pain so that you can coach to the progress. Tell them it's just like learning how to do anything else in the world that they could do better. It's going to be dreadfully uncomfortable at first, and it's going to be worth it. Last but certainly not least, in fact, last in part because I think it's so important, is risk management. So if the first 4 key success parameters were the foundation for truly getting your team turbocharged to succeed faster and cleaner. This one is the capstone. There's a wonderful guy named Dr. David Hewlett who used to say, Kimi, I think if more project managers were better risk managers, we'd have better project managers. And what I told him was, you're right. What are we going to do about it? Because if we don't do something about it, it doesn't matter what your philosophy is. Risk management also rests very clearly on the commitment of the organization at large, because we need to be very clear about how many different places, how many different ways that risk can crop up on any of our projects. One of the biggest problems that a lot of teams have is they don't realize that they slowly but surely lose a little bit of a focus on risk. So how does your project team review risks on your project? How often do they actually address the topic of risk management? Wow. Wow. I am so heartened by this. My God. This must be working. This is terrific. One of the things that I think has been very key in what we have learned about risk management is that unfortunately, risk is one of those things that tends to not be dealt with as aggressively on projects that are going well. And that in and of itself is a huge risk. So one of the things that we tell people, if you want to get better at risk management, define very clearly what the role of a risk owner is, because that's the person who's likely to see triggers occur faster than anybody else, and make sure that people understand that being a risk owner doesn't mean you've got to solve it. It means you're responsible for making sure that everybody knows something has happened. And make risk identification part of at least every other team meeting so that it can be addressed on a productive basis. Now, all of these things are important in part because we believe that the team's culture is going to be based on what they believe works, because what they believe starts to be manifested in how they perform. And when people believe in things that help them perform better, you have an observed culture that shows up in faster performance, in results being delivered better, faster, and more completely. This works whether you're going to use a classic project management approach or Agile or Scrum. It works because it is not telling people what to do. It gives people a reason to believe in why what they do is important. Thanks for joining us on today's overview of the key success parameters. Starting with clear definition, making sure that everybody is literally understanding the same thing from the same perspective, and taking the trouble to make sure that you have clarified where there might be misunderstandings or differences of perspective that could lead to a potential misinterpretation. The ownership model, accountability, making sure that you are willing to take on the job of notifying people when things change. Responsibility, a commitment to do the job right. And authority, permission, power, and protection, together as those folks who have said that their firms support this ownership model very aggressively. The support of this can be an incredible driver of teams delivering better and faster. And customer-focused deliverables. These are the people we're doing the work for. And when we do it in a team that operates from collaborative spirit, it is a great deal more humane and a great deal more productive. Because we can tackle the job of managing and mastering the task interdependency, using rigorous quality as a tool, not a weapon, and making sure that risk management doesn't accidentally get swept under the rug, doesn't accidentally get forgotten. Now, one of the ways that we address this is we don't ask you guys to attack everything at the same time. We actually have an organizational assessment that we give because at some point you got to figure out where you're going to start. There are 7 parameters after all. So it's a 5 to 7 minute survey. It's multiple choice, and we administer it to individuals within a team or sometimes to the entire stakeholder community. If you're interested in taking the beta, you'll notice that there is a web link that's listed on your screen, and I really encourage you to take the time to do this. As I said, it's a 5 to 7 minute survey. If you want, we're also more than happy to give you a 30 to 45 minute consultation and interpretation of your results against the results of overall trending. Then we can do that with a little bit of advance notice. So please do that by contacting Vicki White in order to set up a quick appointment, and we'd love to meet with you to do that. Every team has the capacity for success under the right circumstances. I hope you've seen how we believe that there is actually a way to define the right circumstances. And if you can define the right circumstances, those circumstances that contain the 7 key success parameters, then you can measure it. And if you can measure it, you can make them even stronger for your organizations and your teams. If you're interested in having us do an assessment or discovery process for your entire team, please email Vicki, set it up, and she'll make sure to send you a team-based collection point for the assessment that you can use. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to talking with you soon. And please don't hesitate to give us a call. If you need a PDU for this particular webinar, please feel free to contact me at kzimski@ksppartnership.com or vicky@hvwhite@ksppartnership.com. Thanks for joining us for this very first of the KSP Partnership webinars, the overview of the KSP elements, and in the coming months we'll cover each one of these at a greater depth. Thanks again for your attention, and have a great rest of the day.